Hi, I'm Susan. I want to share a story that still haunts me, especially around Valentine's Day. It was a few years ago, and I had just started dating someone new, someone I thought was perfect. His name was Mark, and he was charming, funny, and everything I had ever wanted. But that Valentine's Day turned into a nightmare I could never have imagined. It was a chilly February evening, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh roses and chocolate. Mark had planned a surprise for me, and I was excited. He picked me up, and we drove to a secluded spot outside of town, a little park that was known for its beautiful views and romantic atmosphere. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the trees, and everything felt perfect. As we walked hand in hand, I noticed how quiet it was. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves under our feet and the distant chirping of birds settling in for the night. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the time of year. But there was something about the stillness that made me uneasy. We found a cozy spot under a large oak tree, and Mark set up a small picnic. He had brought my favorite snacks and a bottle of wine. As we sat down, I felt a chill in the air, but I attributed it to the evening breeze. We laughed and talked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Isn't this nice?" Mark said, pouring me a glass of wine. I smiled, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Just then, I noticed a figure in the distance, partially hidden behind the trees. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a person standing still, just watching us. My heart raced. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward the figure. Mark squinted but shrugged it off. "It's probably just someone out for a walk. Don't worry about it." As the sun dipped lower, the shadows grew longer and the air turned colder. I tried to focus on Mark, but my eyes kept drifting back to the figure. It hadn't moved, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I decided to ignore it and enjoy the moment, but the unease lingered. After a while, we finished our picnic, and Mark suggested we take a walk around the park. I hesitated but agreed, hoping the movement would shake off the feeling of dread. As we walked, I noticed that the figure was gone. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. Suddenly, I heard a rustling noise behind us. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there, just the trees swaying gently in the wind. Mark noticed my unease. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I just thought I heard something," I replied, trying to sound casual. But deep down, I felt a growing sense of panic. We continued walking, but the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Just then, I heard footsteps behind us. I turned around. And my blood ran cold. There, standing a few feet away, was a man. He looked disheveled, with wild hair and a crazed look in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. I froze, fear gripping me. Mark stepped in front of me, trying to protect me. "We're just enjoying the park," Mark said, his voice steady but firm. The man took a step closer, and I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. "You shouldn't be here. This place isn't safe," he warned, his eyes darting around as if he was expecting someone. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Let's go," I whispered to Mark, my voice trembling. He nodded, and we turned to leave, but the man stepped in our path. "You don't understand. They're coming for you," he said, his voice low and urgent. I could feel my heart racing as I glanced at Mark, who looked equally confused and scared. Without thinking, we pushed past the man and ran back toward the car. I could hear his footsteps behind us, echoing in the stillness of the night. My breath came in quick gasps as we sprinted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We reached the car, and I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. "Get in," Mark shouted, and I jumped into the passenger seat. He slammed the door and started the engine, the headlights cutting through the darkness. As we sped away, I glanced back, but the man was gone. Just like that, he had vanished into the night. We drove home in silence, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavily in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. What had that man meant? Who was he warning us about? When we finally arrived at my apartment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But as I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My phone buzzed with a notification. I picked it up, and my heart dropped. It was a message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone to the park. They're watching you." I looked at Mark, my mind racing. "What does this mean?" I whispered, fear creeping back in. He shook his head, equally confused. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The shadows in my room felt alive, and every creak of the building made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching me. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder if the man in the park was right. Were we truly safe? To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he meant. But every Valentine's Day, I remember that night and the fear that still lingers in the back of my mind. Because sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't explain.